My name's Greg. I'm an addict. Hey, gang, isn't it pretty? Perfect morning. Perfect morning. If you will those of you who care to join me in another moment of silence? I do this so I can get in touch with where I need to be, and hopefully you can too. So if you will. Thank you, God. I'm so glad to be back. It's really neat. I was here a few years ago, and I really enjoyed myself. It was a lot hotter, and it was a lot wetter. This weekend seems to be just about perfect weather-wise, and gosh, it's been beautiful. It really has. You know, I don't know that we really need much of a spiritual speaker with nature around us and looking out over the water and the trees and the beauty we have around us. It speaks real highly of our spirit. Speaks really highly of God. So I always kind of wonder about this spiritual speaker stuff anyway, because I don't know if I understand for sure. It's kind of like the clarity statement. I don't know if I understand for sure. I figured if the committee was worried about what I was going to say, they wouldn't have asked. and then it says that we don't differentiate between drugs, but we sure do. You know, heroin and aspirin are two entirely different things, and we differentiate drastically. I have thyroid disease, and I take Synthroid every morning, so my thyroid gland to replace some of the stuff my thyroid gland would normally produce, and no one really thinks of that in the same terms as cocaine. So, we do differentiate a lot, and so I wonder sometimes about that statement. I know what the purpose of it is when we first started using it, and I think it was real important because we needed to have a clear message, and there wasn't one. And we needed to have NA speakers, and there weren't a lot. And we needed to have a fellowship that could stand on its own 2 feet and say, hey, we're here. And you know what? Hey, we're here. One of my greatest joys has been able to watch Narcotics Anonymous and participate in Narcotics Anonymous from a point where we were just barely here, with perhaps less than 200 active members, to where we are today with, 30,000 groups in the U.S., another 10,000 outside the U.S., something like that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What a miracle we are. And look around at us. Look around at us. I hope you've had the opportunity to touch spirits with a stranger this weekend. Not a stranger, another addict that you've never met before. One of the things that this type of event is about is meeting people. And if you've just hung out with your friends, there's still time. You know, you got an hour or so after this meeting where you can meet somebody you don't know and meet them as an NA member. I hope you have gotten to know some new people, because the relationships we build in activities like this are among the best we can find. The friendships that develop that can last years and years and years and years come from events like this, or come from H&I meetings, or come from wherever. It's so different than it used to be. Oh, before I forget, do we have any newcomers here? Newcomers, raise your hand. First year. In the first year. All right. How about newcomers within their first 5 years? Raise your hand. All right. Welcome, 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 welcome. I hope I challenge you a little bit. I hope I make you uncomfortable a little bit at times. I hope I say some things that bother you. Because if you're never challenged and you're never uncomfortable, you're never going to grow. And this is about growing. Narcotics Anonymous is not about standing still. In the beginning, it's about getting clean. But, getting clean is kind of like getting your shit together. Got it together, here it is. Oh, my God, what do I do with it now? Where do I put this? And how do I get it off my hands? Staying clean over a period of time is a process of getting closer to God. It's a process of simplification. It's a process of letting go of all the barriers we place between each other. It's a process of embracing principles. It's a process of learning how to love in a very, very different way than most of us have ever known. It's all those things. Once we get clean, of course, getting clean is opening the door. Without being clean, that path can't be walked. The path of spiritual growth that Narcotics Anonymous can't be walked unless we're clean. I believe Narcotics Anonymous is just as sure a path to, if you will, spiritual enlightenment as exists in any religion. It's a path that isn't based on a religion per se, but it's certainly a path based on the daily application of spiritual principles. And I want to talk some about that. For those of you who are new and are still, and for whom identification is still very important, I don't talk a lot about my using. My using was really boring. I started using when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, fat kid. They gave me speed, and I loved it. And I loved it so much that I used to suck on my gums at night. And I'd wake up in the morning with my pillow covered with blood because I'm sucking on my gums. And they gave me tranquilizers and sleeping pills, so I wouldn't do that anymore. And I loved the tranquilizers and sleeping pills. And, once I had medicine in the medicine cabinet, then those other bottles in the medicine cabinet were fair game, too. And by the time I was 10 years old, I was a full-blown addict and didn't know it. Would never have put a finger on that. Would never have suspected. Because I was taking medicine, and the doctors told me, and my parents told me, and my grandparents told me, if you take this, you're either going to feel better, you're going to act better, or it's going to make you better. And, I'm just a kid, I want to feel better. I act better, make me better. Okay, yeah, good, yeah. And if I take 2, then, I'd do twice as good. And 3 will do 3 times. I was not a dumb kid. I figured that out real quick. I could do that on my fingers. And, that's what my childhood was about. I got into high school and found out there were other drugs, and it surprised me. I didn't run the streets early on. In fact, I never ran the streets that hard. That wasn't the path I had to take in addiction. My path was you use drugs every day as long as you can, no matter what. Got into high school, I found out there were other drugs, loved them. Got into college, went to college, played football, got hurt, found out there were other drugs, loved them. Flunked out of college, found other drugs, loved them. Crawled into Narcotics Anonymous. I came to, what was that like, Mike? Maybe 2 of the examples. Okay, I got clean in October of 1970 in Narcotics Anonymous in Los Angeles. I graduated from high school in February of 1965 in Los Angeles, getting high. And for those 5 years between high school and getting clean, I ran the western states as crazy as I could. I used every day with no time off for bad behavior. I used everything available to me. And my main mission in life was to stay loaded, was to keep the edge off. And that's what I did. That's all I did. I missed those formative years. Monterey Pop Festival, I was there. I don't remember shit. I was walking around going, where's my car? That's what I did at Monterey. I don't remember Jimi Hendrix playing. I don't remember any of that stuff. I have a ticket stub that says I was there. And, some people told me I was there. I don't know. Giant step for mankind, man landing on the moon. Big deal at work. They brought in a TV, and, we shut the equipment down. I was working at some factory, and, they made a big deal out of it. And, I had just the right amount of heroin in me and nodded out and missed the whole damn thing. Had to watch the reruns. That's what it was like. I'd go on dates, and my idea of a good time as a date was, I love you, and throw up on them. That's what it was like. I never did anything except under the influence. Before I came to Narcotics Anonymous, I had never driven a car except under the influence. I'd never been on a date except under the influence. I'd never made love except under the influence. I'd never held a job except under the influence. I'd never been to a concert except under the influence. I'd never been to a club except under the influence. I'd been to school as a child, first and second grade, not under the influence, but that was a long time before. I never did anything except under the influence. That's what I did. And I did that every day. The last year of my using kicked my ass. And there was a series of very, very painful events which occurred. They were painful to me. And they got me looking for help. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I've done that in the past a lot. My girlfriend and I gave up a child for adoption, which kicked my ass because I wanted to keep that child. But I had come to the realization that I couldn't be promised to be around to help raise the child. My grandmother died. She was an addict too. She took too many Reds one night and slipped and fell and scalded to death in the shower. Death by addiction. I married the gal who had my kid. I thought that was going to fix it. That didn't fix it. We will celebrate our 28th wedding anniversary in June. I came to Narcotics Anonymous with a relationship. Had a relationship throughout my time clean. I am not a believer in no relationships in the first year. I think that we are probably the world's worst lovers because we don't know how to do that. And I don't think it's real healthy for us to take lovers right away, because chances are, if you haven't changed, your next partner and yours relationship is going to be a lot like the last one. And chances are, if you're new, the last one sucked. Okay? Turned into a tragedy. And if you haven't learned anything new here yet, and if you haven't worked some steps around here yet, it ain't going to be no different. So stop fooling yourself. We are still drawn like moths to a flame to absolutely the wrong people for us, the worst possible people for us. We are still, desperately attracted to the people who will confirm our low self-esteem, where we could end up saying, see, I told you no one could ever love me. See, I told you I'm no good. See, I told you I'm good only to be used and abused. See, I told you I'm only capable of using, abusing, and not loving. We will seek out the people that will make that come true until we change. If you want to come around here and just stay clean, you probably can do that. But if you don't change, your life's not going to change all that much. If you keep living like a dope fiend, your life is going to continue to be full of the consequences of living like a dope fiend, whether you're clean or not. And you know what? It hurts a hell of a lot more when you're not, when you're clean. We've got that thing in the readings that says, when at the end of the road we can no longer function as a human being either with or without drugs. Yeah, and without drugs hurts a hell of a lot more than with drugs sometimes. But if we can get there and then start to change on top of it, our lives can blossom like a flower, can unfold like a rainbow, can be beyond our wildest dreams. And that's what this is about. If you want to go out there and live the way you were living, you have a right to do that. But I didn't suspect you came here because the way you were living was real swift. I mean, my experience is go to hell and turn left, and there's N.A. But you know what? You don't have to change. You can keep doing the things you were doing. You don't have to do that. There's a lot of people who talk about what you've got to do in Narcotics Anonymous, and you know what? This is not a got-to program. But I got to go to meetings. You don't have to go to meetings. Don't have to go to meetings. I got to write an inventory. You don't have to write an inventory. I got to make amends. You don't have to make amends. You don't got to do none of that stuff. I got to get a sponsor. No, you don't. You don't have to get a sponsor. I got to admit that I'm powerless over my addiction. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do none of this stuff. If you're lucky, you'll get to do some of that stuff. You know, if you're new here, chances are that you will die of this disease in a horrible way. And if you're real fortunate and managed by some miracle to stay clean long enough to start living this way a little bit, you may get the chance to survive. But there's no guarantee that's going to happen. A lot of that depends on what you do between now and then. Now, I really am a firm believer in the principle of reciprocity. The way you live determines the way you live. How you living? How's your life? Are you proud of your life, or are you embarrassed about your life? Is your life consistent with what the program teaches, or are you sneaking around the edges? Are you just hanging out, living like a dope fiend? If you're just hanging out, living like a dope fiend, please change. Because addiction is a hell of a way to die. It's a horrible way to die because it takes everything. In a terrible way. You know that. We've all been there. We all know about the hopelessness. You know. One of the things that happened that last year that I like to share, you know, I just burned in my brain. I'm sitting backwards on a toilet in a dirty bathroom like I did a lot, you know, can't get a vein, dripping blood on the floor, going, God damn, look what's become of me. What happened to that kid who wanted to be a teacher, who wanted to do that, who had this dream, who wanted to be loved, and here I am, sitting in a fucking toilet, strung out, dripping blood on the floor. What's wrong with this? And you've been there, or somewhere like it, that desperate, lonely, horrible place that we all get to at one time or another. Whether it's holding a friend in your arms when they die, whether it's getting locked up one more time after you promised yourself this time it would be different, whether it's waking up in bed with a stranger or a friend you didn't intend to go to bed with, whether it's ripping off your grandmother, whether it's driving down the road loaded in your car and killing a child, all those things that addicts do that make us hate ourselves so bad, that make us so hopeless. You've been there or you wouldn't be here. Don't forget that place. We work hard to try to forget that place and that feeling, right? We work hard to try to forget that feeling. If I just work these steps hard enough, I can get rid of that feeling. Don't lose that feeling. Don't lose the memory of that feeling. Don't live there anymore. But remember that, because there's going to be a time when that'll keep you clean, if you can remember it. I never, ever want to go back to that. I never, ever want to sit on that toilet again. I also don't want to be a newcomer again. People talk about the first year as being a gift. My first year was not a gift. It was hold on to my ass with both hands. You know. And when it fell off, I'd pick it up and bring it to a meeting. You know. I mumbled a lot. I mumbled a lot when I was using, and that didn't change when I first got clean. Anyway, that's what happened the last year of my using, those feelings, that loneliness. And you know about the loneliness, that desperation, and you know about the desperation. Don't let go of that. That's what brought me to Narcotics Anonymous. It wasn't the fact that I'd used drugs every day for 15 years, or 14 or 16 or however long it was. It was because I came to a point where I just didn't have the spirit left to keep on keeping on. When I just didn't have the courage to face another day. when I just didn't have any more of myself to sell. My spirit was broken. The child who had dreams was gone, and I was all used up. I felt all used up. And I started looking for help. What I found in California in 1970 was there was no help. The only treatment program I could find was Synanon, and they wouldn't take me because I didn't have a police record. I finally called a suicide line, and they said, "Are you eligible for Narcotics Anonymous?" I say that pretty much the same way because that's the way it happened. And it's a funny little deal. And they said, "We've got this phone number." And I said, "I don't know. I've never heard of Narcotics Anonymous. I mean, God, there were only 20 meetings in the world. You know, it's not like there was a lot of Narcotics Anonymous. There was like 10 meetings in Southern California and a half a dozen in Northern California and maybe another half a dozen or less floating around, and somebody had started it up, but it hadn't died out yet." That's what it was like. They said, "Well, we don't know anything about this Narcotics Anonymous either, but we got this phone number, and you sound like you might be a candidate, you know." And so I called and talked to a man, and he said, "Well, come to a meeting. There's a meeting tonight in Hermosa Beach, California." And I wasn't going to any meeting that night. In fact, I wasn't even laying on the bed anymore, because every time I lay down on the bed, I was shaking so bad, I fell off. So I lay on the floor. And, well, that wasn't a constant thing. That was, you know, in periods of time. That did happen 2 or 3 times. I fell off the bed kicking, you know. And my wife, oh, God love her, she's got cold hands. And all she wanted to do when I was kicking was rub my back. And I about killed her, I think. Because every time she touched me, I'd spasm or something. It just, you know, it's like someone throwing ice cubes on me. And I would go, "Ah, don't touch me." You know how that is, right? That's what it was like. I came to that first meeting in October of 1970. I used twice after my first meeting. I came to my first meeting on a Thursday night at a church on the corner of Yucca and Gower in Hollywood, California. There were probably 20 people at that meeting, sitting around a square of tables. Different people shared. I got called on. I don't have a clue to what I said. Probably my name's grown. Maybe have a problem. You know, I wasn't real committal. I was scared to death of you because, you know, after all, this was Narcotics Anonymous, and I'd read about drug addicts. And I knew what horrible, horrible people drug addicts were, and all the horrible things that drug addicts did. And, you know, I, of course, wasn't a drug addict. But this was Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm going, shit, you know. I just wanted to clean up so I could get high again, you know, because I hadn't been getting high in a while, and, you know, the stuff wasn't working anymore, and I was just, you know, I was pushing not getting well anymore, if you know where that is. I was all used up. But, I got all dressed up, and, you know, I drug out this suit from out underneath the bed, and, you know, 3-piece black suit and tie, and I didn't want you to know who I was. Well, as a result of getting all dressed up like that, I think about half the people in the meeting thought I was a narc. I was 23 years old, going on 109, and all used up, ready to die. Scared to death. Because I wasn't like you. I wasn't like the horror stories. I mean, I saw Reefer Madness when they were showing it for real. You know, and expecting us to believe that crap. Huh? They used to show that for real to try to scare us. And, you know, I knew about drug addicts. I read Naked Lunch, you know, and there's that scene of the guy sitting on the stairs to the subway with a safety pin, gouging a hole in his leg so he could use a dropper without a point. You know, I never did that. You know, I must not be an addict. You know, I couldn't be a dope fiend. I didn't do that. I just, you know, had a 2-for-1 connection, and, you know, half a dozen or a dozen people strung out, plus all the paper I could hang, and everything else I had to do to keep on keeping on. And when one of the people I was dealing to copped, you know, I got some dope, and I stepped on theirs and got some more dope, and, you know, that's what it was like. That's what my life consisted of. My world got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I used to have these great dreams. I remember I was going to go camping. Everybody had tried to go camping the last year or so. I got it. We had it all together. This buddy of mine and I. We got the tent and the food and got all these drugs together. Thank you. And all this stuff. We had all this stuff going, planned in the perfect weekend. We were desert camping in the Mojave Desert, and we got out there and we set up the tent and we fixed a meal and we used all the drugs. Had to turn around and come back. I couldn't get 100 miles from the connection. Impossible. Could not get 100 miles from the connection. It was not in the scheme of things. My world got small. I was pressing 20 miles was tough. My world got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until I ended up, alone. Till I ended up, with one of my two remaining friends. I used to say my best friend, but the reality is I still had two people I called friends. I hated both of them because they were just like me. And one of them hung himself. And on my wedding day, I was supposed to have been a pallbearer at his funeral. Well, my other friend that was left, he didn't go to the funeral either. And he just brought me some dope so I could celebrate getting married. And that's kind of what it was like. I come to Narcotics Anonymous. At that first meeting, I heard something that made a difference. Someone said you never had to use again against your will. And that made a difference for me. That made a difference for Greg. Because, you see, that meant something to me. I wasn't one of these people that scratched their head and said, that's a weird statement. Because I've said, yeah, I've done that. And I don't want to use against my will anymore. How many of you understand that statement? You never have to use again against your will. If you understand that, there is no question whether or not you're an addict. How many of you have struggled with whether or not you're an addict? Huh? Only addicts struggle with whether or not they're an addict. How many of you cling and really, really, really feel extra special about their clean time? Yeah. My wife's not an addict. She doesn't know the last time she had anything. She doesn't care. Huh? Only an addict is concerned about staying clean. How many of you are like desperately want to stay clean or need to stay clean, huh? Yeah. Do you think non-addicts are desperate about staying clean? Huh? We put ourselves through all this mental masturbation, and the very fact that we do that is evidence of our addiction. Yeah, isn't it? And everybody, I don't care who it is, we go through pretty much the same thing. One of the first things that happens for most of us when we come around the program is we try to disqualify ourselves. Mine was that I'd never been busted. Okay? That was the thing I had tried to disqualify myself. I ignored entirely the fact that I was using between a quarter and a half ounce of heroin a day and had used drugs daily for 15 years. I focused on the fact that I'd never been busted and therefore I couldn't have a problem. And I really didn't need to consider this total abstinence shit that everybody's talking about. That I was different, that I didn't belong in Narcotics Anonymous, and maybe, just maybe, if I cleaned up for a little while, then I could use again. That was my rationalization. That's how I tried to disqualify myself from Narcotics Anonymous. And then some jerk came up to me and said, Greg, it really doesn't matter whether you're an addict or not, because if you're not an addict, staying clean is no big deal, and it'll be easy for you. And you won't miss it. And I'm going, shit. You see, because it wasn't easy and it was a big deal. And they used to tell me things like the game we play is called You Bet Your Life. Huh? And I'll tell you, I'll repeat that. The game we play is You Bet Your Life. When we entertain thoughts of using. When we think there's something out there for us. You bet your life. Huh? Well, maybe I could drink a little wine occasionally with dinner. After all, lots of people do that. You bet your life. What do you get if you win? You get to have a glass of wine. What if you lose? Yeah, but it's the way you die. Dying's easy. You bet your life. What if it's 50-50? I'm going to bet my life, my happiness, my world against being able to share a joint with somebody. And it ain't no big deal if I'm not an addict, right? So what the hell? Being able to have a glass of wine with dinner. Being able to take a medication that alters my thinking that I used to get high on. You know. I bet my life. I bet my life that I can hang out in the bars just to listen to the music. What if you win? You get to hang out in the bars, listen to music, see people go to the bathroom and throw up. You know, watch people hitting on each other. See people fight, cut each other. Excitement. What do you get if you lose? Yeah, but it's the way you die. It's the way we go. Dying's easy, remember? How many of you have prayed for death? Pissed off when you didn't die? Yeah. Dying would have been okay. What's terrifying to me is the possibility of living in active addiction and not being able to die and not being able to get busted and not being able to end up in an institution. What if you just had to go out there and do it for 40 years? Think about that shit. And I don't care whether you're young or old. What if you just had to go out there and do it for 40 years the way we do it? And not be able to die, and not be able to get busted, and not be able to end up in treatment or some kind of psychiatric institution. Now that's terrifying, isn't it? To me, that is the most terrifying thing in the world. And I'm here because I don't ever want to live there. Growing up in NA has been a trip. You know, that's enough about the early times and that negative stuff, and, you know, I warned that to death. You know, what NA is all about is living. It's all about getting to change. It's all about growing up. It's all about learning how to love. It's all about stepping away from that misery and sitting out on the sand and touching spirits with people and living clean and loving each other and finding real friends and finding a purpose in life and finding out what you want to be when you grow up. Learning what it is to be an adult. I'm still trying to figure that one out. You know, I never wanted to be I never planned on being an adult. You know, one of the things that has become, and there's a good percentage of older addicts staying clean here this weekend, and you know, this aging process is really a trip. It is so bizarre. I mean, I can't tell you how weird it is to be 51 years old. Now, I got clean when I was 23, and all of a sudden I'm 51, and it's bizarre. And I know there are folks here who have experienced that, who've experienced it quite a while ago, and there are folks here that are going to experience that. But it's really, really strange, this aging process. I find myself doing things today. I mean, and recovery and learning how to live a more spiritual life is a weird trip too. This January or February, I applied for a job as a clinical director of a program in a juvenile prison in North Carolina, and I'm basically doing something similar to that in Tennessee right now, and this job would have meant a significant increase in salary, certainly much better working conditions, a very, very supportive group of co-workers instead of a very, very destructive group of co-workers. And I really wanted the job. And you know what? I got it. That ain't no big deal. Things like that happen all the time to us. The miracle was that I turned it down. The miracle and the change in my life is that I turned that job down. Because I've got a 16-year-old learning disabled daughter who is flourishing in school for the first time in her life, and I won't take that away from her. And what Greg wants doesn't have to take priority over what's good for our family. That's weird. You know, I had to say, hey, check this out, Greg, and I talk to myself. It's a handy thing. And now check this out. What are you coming from? I mean, my family has been, you know, always been very, very supportive of me. My wife and I, we still like each other. We're friends. We like to do things together. Some of you have met Lois. You know, she works a good program. She puts up with a lot of my bullshit. I put up with a lot of her bullshit too. I think that's probably why we're together almost 28 years. I respect her and she respects me. That's probably the biggest reason why we're together. Love is great. Respect is wonderful. You know, and I define respect as the ability to see the God in someone and treat them accordingly. You know, that's what I want to do in my interpersonal relationships. I want to learn how to respect better. I want to be able to look into your eyes and see God and treat you that way. That's respect. It isn't necessarily about some of the things I used to associate with the respect. Most of those were based on fear, or envy, or covetousness, or other defects. Most of the things I used to associate with respect had nothing to do with what I associate respect with today. They had to do with sickness. They had to do with keeping us apart. They had to do with ignorance of anonymity. I believe we're all brothers and sisters by virtue of the Spirit, and that we're all manifestations of God. And that if we can begin treating each other that way, treating each other with a little dignity, treating each other with a little spirit, instead of always, you know, self-obsession, then we'd have a lot healthier program. And the better we're able to do that as a fellowship, the stronger Narcotics Anonymous will become.
Yes. Yes.
But it takes growing up. It takes applying spiritual principles. And, you know, part of that reciprocity I mentioned earlier, what it boils down to is the way you live determines the way you live. If you're living positive, then positive things will happen in your life. If you're living by principle, then your life's going to be full of principle. And principle always works. That's the nature of spiritual principles. They always work. My understanding of this program has grown over the years. I went through, and I told somebody I'd probably talk about this, and I haven't talked about it in a long time, but I really believe we go through pretty much the same stuff in this process at pretty similar times. I call these things, for me, the thoughts, I used to call them crises at one time, but they're really more like thresholds. They're really more like doors we have to go through in growing up in recovery. And I mentioned the fact that one of the first things almost everybody tries to do is disqualify themselves. I don't know anybody who comes to Narcotics Anonymous for the first time because they have much of a desire to stop using. I think a lot of people come that they have a desire to stop hurting, a desire maybe to clean up, a desire to get a probation officer or a judge off their ass, a desire to get a family member or a boss off their ass, desire to get out of trouble, desire to get out of the pain they're in, a desire to avoid the consequences of their recent behavior. That's why we come. We don't come because we have this cosmic desire to stay clean for, however long you've been clean. We come, because we can't keep living the way we're living, one way or another. You got to find that desire to stay clean somewhere. And I think coming around is a real struggle with that. Once I got through kicking and got through being sick all the time, I started getting high off of not using. Getting high off of not being in trouble. Getting high off of not having somebody look out over your shoulder all the time. You know, or having to check out who was following you. It was like dope. Man, it was great. And I loved it. It felt good. You know, at a month or 2 months, you know, I didn't have to throw up every morning. God, what a concept. I didn't have to have a get-up just to make it out the door. You know, it was wonderful. It was like dope. You know, and wow, it was great. And at 90 days around NA, I'd memorized the little white book, but that's all we had. The readings today, and I had all the answers. It was, you know, ask me any question. You know, the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without. I talked good, long shit. Yeah, didn't have an idea of what it meant, but I could say it good because I memorized. I listened in meetings once the fog cleared enough for me to listen, and I heard that stuff, and they gave me a white booklet, and they said, here, this is a hip pocket program. Stick this in your hip pocket, and every time you pull your pants down and take a shit, read a chapter. And I did that. You know, sometimes I snuck a second section in. and that's what we were told when we came around. Go to meetings every day. And I went to meetings every day. I went to 500 meetings my first year. And it was tough to do that in Narcotics Anonymous in 1970. I remember there was a meeting at All of You Hospital that I used to go to on Sunday mornings, and that was the first time I got honest in a meeting. It was like what we would call today as an H&I meeting. It was a meeting in a treatment center, and everybody was sedated. Everybody was drugged out. They kept them that way for 3 or 4 weeks, cut them loose, and told them you're fixed. You know, that was the state of the art. I hadn't been able to find that place before I quit using. Shit. Sounds just like my kind of place, huh? Doesn't it sound like our kind of place? Give them drugs for 3 or 4 weeks, you know, bless them, and send them out the door as cured. Wonderful, wonderful concept. But anyway, I found that in recovery. And I used to go out there, and it was the first place I could get honest because, you see, everybody was loaded, and no one was paying attention to what I was saying anyway. And they had a damn earthquake in California, and the hospital collapsed. Killed a bunch of people. And you know what? The meeting died out, and I couldn't go there, so I had to find someplace else to be honest. What a bitch. That was terrible. You know, as I got past that 90-day wonder stage, somewhere around 4 or 5 months, the feelings hit. And I'm going, oh my God, this is why I used. And I didn't know what to do with those feelings. I hadn't felt them in so long. I mean, not directly. They'd all distorted and everything by the drugs. And they hit, and they hit hard. You know, I sometimes talk about the big blue bird of feelings flew over and went, pfft. I'm going, oh my God, here it comes! Oh. And that's what it felt like. You know, this onslaught of emotion that I was so unused to. And at 6 months, I'm running around going, oh my God, it's not the drugs. I've been clean 6 months, and I'm still all fucked up. And it ain't the drugs. What do I do now? Oh, shit. The answer, of course, was substitution. Right? And I gained 180 pounds my first 2 years. I gained a person. It's cute. I used to... Well, somebody here... Who weighs about 180 pounds? This is fun. Come on. Stay. One of them. I didn't gain all 3 of them. But I went from 180 pounds to 360 pounds. And over a period of, 13 years, or 12 years, 10 years, I lost that weight, and moved to Georgia, and I was doing great, and then, you know, I stopped smoking. And I went, blew up like a balloon again, and, you know, here I am. You know, and I can't do anything about it. Part of it has to do with being 50 years old. Part of it has to do with having thyroid disease. Part of it has to do with giving myself permission to medicate myself with food. And one of the things I found out, the basic text, and I'll talk some about this in a little while, basic text says insanity is repeating the same mistakes and expecting different results. And I'm here to tell you, for me, even crazier than that is repeating the same mistakes, knowing what the results are going to be, and going ahead and doing it anyway. Consciously choosing that self-destructive path. Whether that's a relationship, whether that's gambling, whether that's picking up, whatever it happens to be for you, consciously choosing that self-destructive path, knowing you're going to hate yourself in the morning, metaphorically, knowing it's going to destroy you, and being compelled to do it anyway. When at the end of the road we find we can no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs. Whoa. Now, to me, that's how I look at, one of the ways I look at insanity today. Because I knew what I was doing when I gave myself permission. I got ripped off. Me and a friend got ripped off for $100,000 and a dream. And in order to cope with that, I gave myself permission to eat. So, okay, Greg, you know you're going to gain weight, but you know what? Something to take the edge off. And that's what 20 years clean. And that's insane. Because I knew what was going to happen. And you will find yourself at some point, or at many points, when you have a choice of picking up the self-destructive path one more time, or not. I hope you choose not to pick it up. I know you will. At times. Because we all do. And I don't know anybody with perfect recovery. And I don't know anybody who does this stuff, 100% of the time. And I don't know, it's kind of like the sponsorship deal. If you're looking for the perfect sponsor, you're fucked. Because they don't exist. Everybody in Narcotics Anonymous has defects of character, and if you hang around them long enough, the defects are going to shine on you. And then we get offended, right? How dare they? What the hell do you expect? You don't trust me. Of course I trust you. I trust you to be who you are. You stand up in meetings and say, my name's Greg, I'm an addict. I know about being an addict, I'm an addict. I know about me. Huh? I trust you to fall short of perfection. I trust you to be in your addiction sometimes. I trust you to be lonely, and I trust you to feel deeply also. So there's good parts about that too. Anyway, 6 months getting into substitution. I'm, working, not working, reading. It's all right to sit up all night and read a book. If you do it 2 or 3 nights in a row and you're falling asleep behind the wheel of your car, that's not normal. Sex. There was a period of time when I couldn't sleep unless I made love to my wife or masturbated. Collections, gems and minerals, stamps, coins, bottles, sports, right, basketball, bicycling, running, shopping, gambling, working. The list is, we're very creative people. And we can get strung out on anything. And we all have some creative things that we get strung out on. A lot of times in that second half of the first year is when it first becomes evident. Unfortunately, not too long after that quits working. I found myself like between 2.5 and 3 years, and it seemed like all those substitutions worked. And I went, oh my God, I knew I was sick, but I had no idea. It was kind of like the 6-month thing. Oh, in the middle there, around a year, we have what's called the birthday crazies. And, just before my first year, I I got into something called sabotage. And it was like, well, if I stay clean another 3 weeks, then I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be a newcomer anymore. Gee, I'm looking forward to it, but what if I really do make it? Oh, shit, what do I... Then I'll... Or right after a year when I'm going, oh, my God, what do I do now? Or wow, this is great. I got a year clean. Now I can live like a real person. We go through this stuff, and it's just insane. And I celebrate the occurrence of that insanity every year. It seems like that around my birthday time, I get a little nuts. And you'd think that it changed, but it doesn't change. It's not as bad as it used to be. I don't get as crazy around the first year now as I did my first 5 years. Again, I said and then there was a deal about 18 months when everything got boring. The second half of my second year, I'd been to going to these meetings, and everybody started to sound the same. And it was really a drag. I'd go to a meeting, and I'd know what the person was going to say before they said it, because I'd heard them say it 15 times before. And, after all, nobody was getting any better. Everybody was still sicker than shit. And I focused on all your defects. And I came to meetings looking for the disease. I believe we get out of meetings and out of NA what we come looking for. If you're here this weekend looking for disease, look around. If you're here this weekend looking for recovery, hey, look around. It's a matter of attitude. There is one thing more than anything else that will defeat us in our recovery. This is an attitude of indifference or intolerance towards spiritual principle. An attitude. An attitude. How's your attitude? If I go to a meeting looking for disease, I will find it 100% of the time, and I'll be able to say, see, I told you NA doesn't work. These people are really sick, and I don't belong here. If I go to the same meeting looking for the presence of a loving God and recovery, I'll go into that meeting saying, God, this is great. Look at, they're so-and-so staying clean, and look at their eyes. See how they've changed, man? They've only been clean 2 months, and they've come alive. They're not afraid anymore. And I'll be able to see the miracles of recovery. And the difference is my attitude. It doesn't have anything to do with the meeting. It's me. It's my attitude. And you would think that we would learn about this being an inside thing. There is absolutely nothing external about the first step. Recovery has become real simple. There really is only one problem that we have to face in an infinite number of manifestations. The one problem that keeps coming up in our lives again and again and again and again and again in a gazillion different ways is that we're powerless over our addiction, that our lives have become unmanageable. Physically, mentally, and spiritually. That's the problem. That's the only problem I got. We are very creative on the ways that we come up with to delve into that problem. And you know what? There's only one answer. Making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. And it's always, at some point, this God shit, it better be for real, or I'm fucked. Because you know what? I can't fix me. At around 5 years, 4.5 or 5 years for me, I went through a period of time when it seemed like the program quit working. And that was about that. Finding a new basis for spirituality. What I realized was I couldn't fix myself even with NA. And we're going through a thing like that in the fellowship right now. We got step writing guides out for approval. And you know what? My great fear is once somebody completes one of those, they'll think they've worked the damn step. And it ain't true. We get treatment centers who give certificates for working the first, second, third, and fourth step, right? How many of you who got those certificates have been around here a little while have come to realize that you didn't do any of them? Huh? Or maybe did them just a little bit. Huh? Yeah. my great fear is we'll accept these one of my great fears is we'll accept these step writing guides as the end deal, and this is the way it's got to be, and if you don't do it this way, you don't have real recovery. Bullshit. Not true. There are no gimmicks that are going to fix us. Your sponsor is not going to fix you. There isn't a step writing guide or a church or a therapist or a occult science or a hobby or a crystal or a book or a philosophy or a basic text or an It Works How and Why or a step writing guide that is going to fix us. Those are all external things. There is nothing external about the first step. I am the problem. We are the problem in ourselves. There is nothing outside that is going to fix us. There is no substitute for surrender. There is no job, no lover, no nothing that is going to make it possible for you to avoid turning your will and your life over to the care of God at some point. If you're like me, you will spend years looking for ways to avoid surrendering. And even after you know there is no way to avoid surrendering, that will still be your first approach to most situations. How can I fix this? Okay, God, I can handle this one. I reserve this one for me. It's called a reservation, right? I can handle this one on my own. God, you taught me well. Fellowship is treat me. I'll write about it. Write about it ain't going to do shit if you don't surrender. It might help you get to the point of surrender. It might help you get some clarity, but you still have to surrender. There is no substitute for surrender, and surrender is the scariest thing any of us ever had to do. Surrender is the scariest thing any of us ever have to do. Because by surrendering, we lose control. And I'm sorry. I've been looking for 27 years to find out a different way to do this shit. And I haven't found one yet. I'll keep you posted, though. If I find one, I'll let you know. But as of today, there is no substitute for surrender. And every time I avoid it, I end up with my tail in a crack. I end up in pain. I end up going, God, why am I so stupid? Why didn't I just give up? And every time I'm able to, and you know what? It isn't like that I get stuck and unable to surrender all that much anymore. I still have to deal with that, and it still is a main thing with me. But you know what? As often as I am unable to surrender right at first, I'm able to surrender right at first, and that's a miracle. As often as I get stuck in trying to fix it and control reality, I'm able to avoid and say, no, I'm just going to give this to God because I can't do it right away. And that's a miracle. That's wonderful. That's spiritual growth. In the last few years, probably the big focus of my program has been on this spiritual growth type suckers, path, thing. No, it's what it used to be like. I started looking at the second step. And, I told you about that, repeating the same mistakes, knowing what the results are going to be. But I started really looking about this idea of sanity. And my opinion of the second step has changed pretty radically over about the last 5 years. To me, sanity is being in touch with reality. And insanity is being out of touch with reality. I mean, I went back to that old simple definition. A person who's crazy is out of touch with reality. Right? Well, my insanity is living in contradiction to reality, to spiritual principles. It's living life swimming upstream. It's living life against the grain. It's living life like fingernails on a blackboard. That's my insanity. It's knowing what the results are going to be and consciously choosing the self-destructive path. It's all those things. That's the nature of my insanity. The nature of my sanity is when I can surrender and live life in harmony with reality around me, with God, with spiritual principles. When I can choose the spiritual path over the self-centered path is sanity for me. And that's changed the second step. Today, I've moved God in the second step from the middle of the second step, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. I've moved that to the end of the second step. And I've looked at sanity ultimately being spirituality and my relationship with reality or relationship with God. A positive spiritual relationship with reality, with the universe, with God is sanity. Living in harmony with the laws of nature, living in harmony with the world around us is sanity. Living in dysfunction to those things, living in contradiction to all those things is insanity. So today my second step is I come to believe that a power greater than myself, a set of principles written so simply I can follow them in my daily life, our program, a spiritual path, a path to enlightenment, can restore me to a sane relationship with reality, to spirituality. This process can restore me to sanity, to spirituality. And that's changed all the steps for me. That has changed the way I look at the rest of the steps. Because the third step at that point, instead of being a commitment to keep working the steps, to me means living life. Going out there and showing up for life, with the weapons of spiritual principles in one hand, going, God is going to take care of me if I live this way. Our program is a set of principles written so simply we can follow them in our daily lives. It's not a principle. It's not a series of principles. It's a whole set of principles. And you know what? If you ain't looking at the whole set, you're missing the boat. You can't you can't not work some of the steps and expect the process to come out right. It doesn't work to say, well, all those ones that say God ain't for me. Or, I ain't going to write an inventory. I said you didn't have to do that. The stuff that goes along with that saying, if you don't have to do all these things, is as long as you can stand it. If you stick around here and stay clean and don't write an inventory, there will come a day, if you stay clean, where you will beg someone to show you how to write an inventory. If you hang around here staying clean and never make amends for the harm you've caused in your life, there will come a day when you will beg somebody and get on your knees and pray for God to give you the courage to make an amends. I promise you that. But you don't have to do it. We are entitled to our misery. You have a right not to live this way. The miracle is you get to. You get to recover. You don't have to recover. You don't got to recover. But you get to if you want to. And that, too, is a matter of attitude. Anyway, my third step is living life as if I really, really were committed and believed that there was a loving God that would take care of me. Taking these spiritual principles and trying to apply them best I can, but living life, showing up, standing up for what I believe in. Here I am. And my fourth step, instead of being show and tell, a chronicle of the unmanageability of my life, has been about learning about my morals, learning about what I believe, learning about what that means to stand up for life, learning about who I am and the things in my life that make Greg Greg, and the self-violation that maybe by some miracle I can choose to avoid in the future, and the harm I've caused that maybe I don't have to do it that way anymore. And all these things about Greg. It's about self-assessment. And in the fifth step, it's become about learning and growing and changing and setting the scene where I don't have to continue to violate, where I don't have to continue to cause harm. And I've recently been thinking about this whole thing about admitting. In the first step, most of us realize that when you go into a meeting and you say, my name's so-and-so and I'm an addict, that doesn't mean you've worked the first step. But I'm admitting I'm powerless with my addiction when I say my name's Greg, I'm an addict, aren't I? Well, yeah, but there's more to the first step than that. And we all pretty much agree with that, I think. We don't look at the fifth and the 10th step admissions the same way, and I've begun to believe that the 5th and 10th step admissions, the most important person we have to admit to is our innermost self, just like in the first step. So in the 5th step, with the help of a sponsor, I look at the harm I've caused and own it, and admit first and foremost to my innermost self how I've harmed others, how my actions have caused harm, how I need to change in order to be the type of person I want to be, how I need to give up some of the things, some of the ways I've been doing things, because they're not right. They're not right for me. They're not consistent with my morality. My greatest pain came from has come from when I've violated my own morality. No one has ever violated me like I violated myself. Now, I come from that school. If anybody treated me the way I treat myself, I'd kill them. Huh? Yeah, so do you. If anybody treated me the way we treat ourselves, we would destroy them. Lo and behold, we just tried to destroy ourselves. And so the 5th step, that admission, becomes so important, because then I can change. Then I can get ready to ask God to take care of me and give me some change and some growth. And to me, that's what the 6th step is about, becoming ready to have God perform the miracle that changes me from an animal to a spiritual being. And lets me recognize that. And there's some things that I think are important in that process. And in the 7th step, when I humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings, that's one of the petitions we make in the course of the steps. I think there, as well as with 3 admissions, there are also 3 petitions we make. I believe in the 3rd step, we're asking God to take care of our will in our lives. We're petitioning God. In the 7th step, we're asking for change, for healing, for God to remove our defects of character, our shortcomings, the manifestations of our defects. And through removing the shortcomings, the defects lose power. And in the 11th step, we're asking for knowledge and power, spiritual direction. Petition. So I can live on spiritual energy and spiritual direction rather than self-will. Rather than, this intense drive I have to control and fix the world. And God's answer to my 7th-step prayer is, no sweat, got you covered. Ain't no big deal. First thing we're going to do is take care of the past. Here's the 8th and 9th step. And the biggest mistake I made on the 9th step, 8th and 9th step, the amends process, was thinking it's about the other person. It's about me. This is a self-help program. What are the amends I have to do? I have to mend my relationship with God. I have to let go of those things from my past that are inhibiting and continue to inhibit my spiritual growth. I have to let go of that shame and remorse and guilt and try to make some kind of reparations for the harm I've done so I don't have to keep picking up, karmic shit. I have to make an active effort to regain some kind of karmic balance, if you will. Some kind of balance in my life where the negativity is outweighed by some of the positive things I've done. Where all the shit I've done in the past that have harmed others, that I've done the best I could to repair that damage and repair myself and forgive myself so I can get on with this business of growing up spiritually. Another mistake I made with the amends process was putting off stuff that I couldn't do because the person I had to make amends to wasn't available. I read, and I continue to read that, it said we made direct amends whenever possible, right? Well, If it isn't possible to make direct amends, sometimes we got to make indirect amends. But we still have to make amends, because amends is about changing us. It's not about the other person. If I go to someone I harmed in the past, and it didn't say admit, it said making amends. It didn't say apologize. It says make amends, and try to repair that relationship, and try to repair my spirit around that relationship. If that's great, but their reception of that is kind of irrelevant. It's my reception of that. It's about me forgiving me. It's about doing what I can do to re-enter the world of the living, so to speak. And we go on, and a 10th step is about the present, and God says, got covered in that too. Keep track of what's going on. You did an assessment of your morality in the 4th step, and got closer and got in touch with that in the 5th step. Now in the 10th step, what we're going to do is we're going to continue that process of self-assessment, but it's going to be self-awareness now. Be aware of how we're living. Be aware of how we're going off track, so we can adjust. And I think the purpose of the 10th step is the maintenance of spiritual balance. It's so we can be aware when we start getting off track, and make adjustments by applying spiritual principles to get back on the track we identified in the 4th step and the 5th step. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else, but for me, it's a living, daily, active, constant thing. I have to keep track of how I'm doing. And in the 11th step, seeking through prayer and meditation have become, so important to me. And you know what? Prayer and meditation aren't these weird things to me, although I've done some kind of bizarre prayers and meditations and explored some of that. Prayer and meditation have to do with living. A man who was my sponsor for years gave me a quote out of some book, and I wish I knew what the book was, that said, the greatest prayer a man can offer to a God of any kind is the way they live. And I believe the way we live is a prayer. How are you living? How's your life? Is your life a prayer? Are you comfortable with the idea of the way you're living being a prayer to your higher power? If you're not comfortable with the way you're living being a prayer to your higher power, I suggest you consider changing the way you're living. If you're not comfortable with your day-to-day living practices as being a prayer to the higher power you've come to believe in, then I suggest you consider the possibility of changing the way you're living and trying to live a life that's a positive prayer to a loving God, instead of trying to live a life out to get what we can get. Fix me. Sorry. I hope that pisses some of you off. Because it pissed me off when that first occurred to me. In fact, it scared the shit out of me. Because I wasn't real thrilled with my prayer, the prayer that my life was. And I believe that if I can be aware of God in you and around me, then my consciousness becomes a form of meditation. When I can stand up here and see God's beauty and see God in your eyes and touch spirits, that's as powerful a meditation as exists. Feel the wind blow on you. See the ocean. Feel the love. Feel the spirit around you here. That's meditation. If your attitude can accept the possibility that what you're feeling and seeing is God. So when I live life, my actions become prayer. My awareness has become meditation. That's what I want to be when I grow up. I figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I don't know when I'm going to grow up. But when I grow up, I want my life to be a beautiful prayer and my awareness to be meditation. And I want to be an adult. And I almost figured out one time what an adult was. An adult is someone who takes responsibility for their recovery, for living a spiritual path. A person who takes responsibility and treats the world around them and the people around them with respect. And the ability to which I am able to do that will determine the degree to which I'm treated as an adult. Wow! What a concept. That's what I want to be when I grow up. You know, those things. You know, I want to be a better NA member. I want to be better able to live this way. I want to be better able to embrace my God. I want to be better able to see my God in all things and treat all things with reverence and respect. I want to be able to look at you and set aside all our differences and touch spirits with you. I want to be able to go to work and see that that's a spiritual act. I want to be able to live life aware of the Spirit in all things. And now the 12th step makes a whole lot more sense, because you see where the second step says, if I follow this set of principles, if I use this power greater than myself, a set of principles written so simply we can follow them in our daily lives, I will be restored to a spiritual state, be restored to God, to have my relationship with reality come in harmony. Then that promise in the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, it relates directly. It says, this is what's going to happen, and here it's happened. I try to carry this message to addicts. Live this way. We are the message. The message is not in the basic text. Yeah, it is on one level. But we're the message. You know how important it is when you see someone who's hurting and you walk up to them and you hold their hand and you say, hey, I've been there. You know how important that is? You know how much more important that is than what it says in More Will Be Revealed? You know how much more important that is than what it says in It Works How and Why? You know how much more important that is than what it says in Just for Today? You know, sometimes it's no, bullshit. It is those little things that we do almost unconsciously that make the difference in people's lives. It's those little things that we do by some unknown urge of the Spirit that helps change people's lives. Think about the little things that have changed your life. And be that message. Don't keep people at arm's distance. Touch spirits. Let go of the differences. Live in anonymity. The best of your ability. And again, practice these principles in all our affairs. Our program is a set of principles written so simply we can follow them in our daily lives. Live this way. By living this way and being available, we are the message. And here we are. And you know what? It's okay to be 51 and fat and gray. Lost my teeth. I never planned on it. I never planned on getting here from where I come from. There is no path between here and there. I had a vision, a dream one time. I woke up and I knew that somehow some power had picked me up and put me a different place on a path. And I don't know if I was put back on the path so I could correct some of the mistakes I'd made before, or put over on a different path, or put forward on the path. I have no idea. But that dream extended into waking hours. And you know what? I think that happens for all of us. Every recovery is based on divine intervention. And it takes us years, I believe, most of us, to accept that. My life is based on divine intervention. And the more I can recognize that, and the more I can embrace that, and the more courage I have to accept that, because it's terrifying, the freer I'll be, and the better able I will be to love you. That's all I have today. I love you.